James Monroe, 2 lines, 3630, Atlantic Ocean. Let's find out more.
I keep a close watch on this heart of mine. I keep my eyes wide open all the time. I keep the ends out for the tide to find. Because you're mine, I walk the line. I find it very, very easy to be true. I find myself alone when each day's through. Yes, I'll admit that I'm a fool for you. Because you're mine, I walk the line. As sure as night is dark and day is light, I keep you on my mind both day and night. And happiness I know proof that it's right. Because you're mine, I walk the line. You got a way to keep me on your side. You give me cause for love that I can't hide. For you I know I even try to turn the tide. Because you're mine, I walk the line. I keep a close watch on this heart of mine. I keep my eyes wide open all the time. I keep the ends out for the tide to find.
Music,
I walk the line.
Hello. About to have a journal entry, so you got that new page in front of you for a journal entry. Don't cross my line now. Don't cross the line. We drag it. I'm tired to talk about James.
Hey, you can't go around What'd you say to me? Ooh, my nose.
Alright, take a seat. I'm about to put the journal entry up. Hey, my phone's going up, so yeah. Go. James! Oh! Hey, my phone's up, your phone's up.
Hey, but now you put some good music on. It is. Better than
Alright, here's your journal entry. Starting with Number one, write the whole question, write the date, give yourself a response to it. Music always has a theme to it.
Oh, somebody know about the
So I'm not my essay written. So now I'm going to show you how I use Grammarly for that. Okay, so here's my essay. And I'm going to click through Grammarly suggestions in the right hand.
Good sentences make good neighbors.
Not in the way that you know it. Not in the way you say you care. Not in the way you've been treating your friends. It's not in the way that you stare to your friends. It's not in the way you look for the things that you say that you do. Love isn't always on time.
Today's the 28th.
For the line.
Hey.
Love isn't always on time.
That one is the least we have put it on there.
If you've written your answer, and I see there's like two, talk with your partner about what your answer is.
My answer
Ladies,
is,
boys,
my answer is
Ezzy, watch out with these girls.
good fences make good neighbors. It means it keeps neighbors out of your out so they don't go through your stuff. That's always a good neighbor if they don't go through your stuff. I mean, that's it. Short stuff.
I didn't get it because I didn't understand it, because I think the opposite is true. Fences don't make good neighbors.
They don't want to go through my stuff.
I don't want to go through
I got 22 rifle with
I don't want to
boom.
Got
Who are they going to move? Mammal, reptile, fish, category.
It depends on what I shoot.
That's perfect. I'm glad that you want to talk about that. Because you have questions, or just because you're energized about it. I don't think people should. I think we should. But I think it should be. Consider as
At least it's better what Mr. Plain thinks. You think when you're born you should be authorized to go.
taller than you or not taller than you.
When you're born.
Definitely
And
not.
when they're old ones that you have to reload. One by one.
Like basically the size of a foot, maybe. Max. Chinchilla. Rat.
You think so though?
Rat.
Wolf. This one.
That's fun.
Oh.
Found it on the porch.
Either
So
you
is it
stop
like a
or
hermit crab case?
No, it's really muscle box.
Shoebox.
Oh my
Shoebox
God.
size.
Until I got out.
All right, hey, I hope you're wondering what's going on today. I hope you, like Alexia, remember we're going to start with talking about this. And I hope that you are willing to share your answer to this question.
I sure am.
Hang on a second, I got to see if you take a test. Let me get the test started.
So Harrington said he don't believe me, so he said that he needs around house, to see that, whatever. He's very committed.
Get out of class.
Hush, Jimmy.
Okay, who hit me in the head with a, because like there's been only 3 people? Alex? You hit me with the
Yeah, you got questions? All right, hey, let me re-queue up her test because I'm pretty sure it's expired.
She failed all her classes on.
And just keep, you know what, boys, let's see. Between the two of you, trade one at each table and talk about your question. Just to talk about the question. Go do it. And Ezzy, come talk to the boys about your question. What do you think about that statement?
I don't want James.
I don't want to trade with
Then
you
take
either.
TJ.
Yeah, take these ones.
That means Lindy comes to James.
Ah,
That's tough. That's rough. You gotta take one for the team.
Have fun with that.
but what?
You were gonna say it.
That's tough.
James, we're saying you're in your own category and species.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, that's fun.
Ain't no need. So I said,
Answers for what?
let's do the question. Okay, come on. Yes. You needed that. Anyways, I said, it keeps the name down and stuff.
No.
It ain't no good. No, we're done.
Go back.
Do you have something hard I can get my binder?
Apologies, I just had to give you the extra minutes.
Come on. I need something really hard. TJ, can I borrow your head for a second? I need to bend this thing back up.
Why is he knocking down Mickey? What did he ever do to you?
Not
Do
gonna
you have
work.
something hard I can hit my binder
Just
with?
not gonna work.
It will work. You have a tiny hammer or the Buzz Lightyear figure I can hit with?
Alright, Mickey, apparently it's just not gonna work. Every time the door gets slammed too hard.
You slam it. How do you make it slam?
I need something really hard. I need something really hard.
Alright, here's where we're at. Let's
No.
talk about.
Ooh. Do you have something really hard? Like a
I
book?
love technology.
You have a book?
Let's talk about this question here. So this is a complicated statement, maybe simple on the surface, but when you start to unpeel it, James has kind of already offered his thoughts. I mean, it's a pretty in-depth statement. So James, not that we haven't already heard your high-volume voice, but go ahead and share.
Okay, so what I said was, it keeps your neighbor out so they don't go through your stuff, and then if they do, there's a 22 rifle waiting for them.
So, okay, so it keeps both parties, let's think about yourself as well, keeps you out of his stuff, keeps him out of your stuff, keeps both parties where they belong.
Again,
Ladies, what kind of a conversation did you have about good fences? No one is bothered? Yeah, and I like that, because that,
there we go.
both, James, that's both directions, right? Like, you put yourself in your position, a lot of times we focus on ourselves. I don't want to be bothered by my neighbor. Guess what? Neighbor don't want to be bothered by you. So fences can go both directions. Boys,
Keeps the distance, keeps the peace.
keeps the distance and keeps the peace. I like
Thought of
that.
that one.
What would be a synonym? What could be a synonym for fence? Synonym for a fence.
Wall.
Right? If we're going to not talk about the physical fence line, whether it's barbed wire, white picket fence, stone or concrete, whatever. Take away the physical fence. What is another word?
Affirmation.
Boundary. That's exactly the word I was looking for. TJ, ring ding ding, boundary. Boundaries are healthy in life for the reasons y'all just said. My space with a boundary, his space or her space with a boundary. Good fences make good neighbors. If you don't have you don't have a fence, let's just take a real simple, I live in the city kind of an example, and I like the Johnsons, or at least I don't not like the Johnsons, but man, their dog, little Yorkie, just want to print, like it comes and poops in my yard every morning. And it makes me really not like the Johnsons.
Hey,
I want to like the
hey.
Johnsons, but that dog, a fence, would fix that problem now.
It stops the dog.
No, I like the dog. I kill the dog. Go with the Johnsons. There you go. They're Yorkie stays where they belong. So it's a big idea, okay? This actually comes from a poem by Robert Frost, and I'm not going to go all ELA on you, okay? We're not going to analyze from an English perspective the whole poem. But this phrase in here, good fences make good neighbors, it's a big statement. And we could definitely get into things like state borders, international boundaries, immigration, who you let into the country, etc. Big statement. Want to keep it in mind today, right? This was just your little thought activity for the opener. I want you to keep in mind today as we talk about two lines established by President James Monroe. Lines or boundaries or fences, right? We could use that word for what we're going to talk about with James Monroe today as well.
Okay.
You, James. You're going to get real tired talking about James today.
Oh, so that's actually a good thing that dog comes and poops in your yard.
Fertilizer?
Yeah.
The ag boy would take it to fertilizer. All right, everybody chuckle at my dad joke one more time. And it really is Mount Rushmore before it was precedented, because this is the Mount Rushmore we're speaking of. Look at that left-hand side. You see the little kind of the hump on the rock, and you can see it's the same rock formation. So really is amazing what they did to the side of that mountain there. But we've talked about a lot of precedents so far, and here's some presidents on the side of the mountain when it is precedented. Huh? It is presidential.
Hold up.
All right, now, so what?
You gotta go back to that one. That one, that's not how you pick it.
All right, hey, keep it on track. Like, keep it on track for the good of all of us. Okay. Small class got small. Small class got smaller, and especially with two absences, like we are just this small group that's gonna chat with each other. Okay. So let's keep it cool. Let's start with this. And I recognize that we have not had any review. My other classes today, I kind of went fast because we had half talked it. You guys, I'm going to make sure we understand the War of 1812 before we really jump into the Monroe stuff, okay? We should end up with some time, and had a great round of headbands with third block. And I give you guys credit for that because we just kind of started playing that randomly, right? So we might get to a review game, and I think you guys will appreciate it as well. But first, I haven't asked you to turn this in yet because I want, should you need to look at it in the next few minutes, I want you to do that. Well, we will turn it in after our bathroom break, okay? So, impressment. Kind of went all in on the demonstration of impressment, right? You were impressed into the service of what?
The Navy.
No, in my room, I impressed you into the service of what?
Swanson.
Appling County.
Oh,
Remember that? Oh yeah, Friday.
Are you gonna do that again?
And I'm kind of sad Nicole's not here because I really like what she had said. Lady still has her paper. Nicole's like, well, I used to be a pirate. I'm cool with that.
Hey, can I already like
Some people might have had that attitude. Hey, we used to be British, and I know we fought the war and all that, but British is a pretty cool empire. Some people might have been cool with being taken over by the British. Even though it was a seizing and capturing type of thing. But some people, like Nicole, like, I used to be a pirate, I'll be a pirate again. I used to be British, I'll be British again. But most people were not cool with being seized and forced into the service. Yeah, most people like James,
I would hit you right here.
very much not cool with being impressed into the service of the British Navy. So what we created in here, especially in James, right, he got some hate in his heart. What we created in here for like 2 minutes was the feelings that the country had. We were definitely ready to go to war. That's one reason. Was another reason we were ready to go to war. What are the British still doing in my country? Where were they?
And the things.
In forts.
They would not leave.
Yeah, they're in the frontier, the Western Territory, which is not as developed as our coastal areas. But why wouldn't they leave? Just go. Treaty and renegotiation, and they're still not going. And not only are they not leaving the forts, now they're kind of like poking at another group of people. What group of people is that? The Indians, yeah, the natives. What are they inspiring them to do to us?
Kill us.
Attack us, yeah. They're giving them weapons. They're encouraging them to do attacks. So not only do we have a problem with the British, we have a problem with what they're encouraging the natives to do. So that's two big reasons we want to go with the war toward the British. And bottom line, it's just national pride. Like, we cannot be bullied. We're a real country now. Mommy, wow, I'm a big kid now. We're a real country now. So it's a matter of national pride. So this is going to take us to the brink of war now. not everybody was for war. You guys spent some time talking to 8 cartoonish looking characters with mixed reviews on how lifelike they may have been.
I have
But-
mixed reviews about theirs.
We talked why to go to war. So tell me some of the 4 perspectives why not to go to war.
Are not to?
Yeah, who was against going to war and why? And you may have it on your page.
Margaret, Ellen.
Margaret, what was her
John
perspective?
Randolph, because she was mother.
Because she was a mother.
And
She's
So
a settler in Ohio.
okay, and actually, doesn't she get protection from the British? Right, she got protection from the British out in the fort. You see it?
That's James. Yeah, I remember
That's
that.
my ancestor.
Did you even get this?
I don't even know. Hey, that's actually my ancestor.
Oh, I believe it. I can see it.
That's not. Let me tell you. I'm related to George Washington.
You didn't have any children, so you don't want.
I am related to George.
Uh-huh,
On his wife's side.
okay.
So, yeah.
The face you're giving is telling a lie.
All right, thank you for.
Not French.
Okay, she's a mother, she got protection from the British. What is another one of these reasons why not to go?
Money!
Money.
Dang it!
But how did money influence the desire to not go to war?
So people had negotiations with.
That's exactly right. Some people did trade with England. If you go to war with them, you're gonna lose the economic opportunities that come with trade. So some people were like, please don't take us to war because I make so much money trading with the British.
I'd rather lose money.
Rich people were generally from what party?
Oh,
The F word, the F word. The other one. Got your attention, didn't I? Federalists, right? Federalists. Yeah. Now, I lead you to that point because the Federalists were opposed to going to war. They're actually on the wrong side of the conversation, okay? They went all in on we should not go to war, but they were in the small minority of the country. Most people were more offended by the British than they were wanting to make a lot of money. The Federalists were the few people making money. So the Federalists in the long term, the war kind of does away with their party. They picked the wrong side of the war. As the war goes well for us, we actually win the war. The Federalists look like chumps. They look unpatriotic at best, maybe even treasonous, because they were the ones opposed to the war. Yeah. So the Federalist Party is going to fade to black. They're going to fade away because of all this. So you spent time talking to these 8 people. The most important opinion overall was the man who actually asked Congress to go to war.
He says it was unavoidable.
Unavoidable. Yeah, she really listened. Like she really paid attention. I appreciate that. James Madison is for the war. He asks Congress for a declaration of war. Big deal, because it's the first time that we've actually declared war in our country's history. Fought the revolution, of course, but this time we're a pretty young country. All right, we're kind of like that punk teenager that thinks they know everything.
Yeah.
And am I talking to any of you?
Yeah.
Any of your parents ever make that allegation to you? You think you know everything?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All the time.
As a country, we were young, we were adolescent, and we behaved brash, bold, arrogant, cocky, whatever, all those words, right? So we declared war on the biggest empire in the world.
There was no change in it.
It was not a smart decision from a military perspective, from a financial perspective. But what'd you say? There was no change in his decision. And Congress does vote for
He was
war.
very serious in that video. There was no change in his mind.
Look, he's got like the Neanderthal forehead going.
No, that looks like a monkey.
Alexia paid attention to videos.
I really
I
think
super appreciate that. Now, I'm not going to go over all the battles. I'm going to hit 3 key ones, okay? We talked about, actually, this class, we haven't rehashed anything. What happened in Washington, D.C.?
They burned the Washington.
Yeah. The British marched into our capital city and set it on fire. Guys, I've been to Washington, D.C. I love Washington, D.C. It's a great place to visit. Who's been? Hope Alex has been. Anybody else?
My dad has.
So I got the Arch, I've got DC.
My dad been to DC.
We've all got different experiences, right? Back on track here. I can't imagine Washington, D.C. being invaded by an enemy, right? It is my capital city. Well, at the time, D.C. was not as built up, okay? It definitely wasn't like touristy. There wasn't all the monuments. It was not the city that we know it to be today. But still, it's our capital city. For the enemy to march right in and set fire to the Capitol building and the presidential mansion, that's a big deal. Now, why do I call it the presidential mansion?
That's where he lived.
Yes, but what do you know it as today?
The White House.
Yeah, term White House is actually not in our American vocabulary yet. It's called the presidential mansion. When it burns down, now I think to this day, I should do some research on this. I think to this day, certain structures still exist that is original. But most of the cosmetics, the interior got burned down during this time. We had to rebuild a lot of it. When they rebuilt it, they painted it white, and it became known as the White House. Yeah. So White House comes after the burning down of the presidential mansion. It gets rebirthed as the White House. So this happens. President Madison at the time, he's actually out of the city. He's in Maryland with the troops. He's like watching the war happen and directing the troops a little bit. But who's in the White House? You remember from your
Mom and Dad.
scavenger hunt? Who's in the White House? No.
Kids.
Who's kind of taking care of the affairs of Washington, D.C. at this time?
Secretary.
It's on your notes.
Mine's in my binder.
James.
James
Madison.
Madison is the president.
And some, yeah.
James Monroe. James Monroe.
Monroe, something there.
Oh, shoot.
His wife, Dolly.
That's what I
trying to leave-
said.
I feel like y'all were overthinking that.
Oh,
one.
it was on
Yeah.
the front page.
Yeah,
That's what
Dolly
I
Madison.
said.
Dolly Madison. Dolly Madison is a total boss babe. All right. I like elevating women. I like telling the story of cool women throughout American history. She's definitely one of them. She held down the fort, if you will, held down the mansion while the president was gone. The British are marching in, right? Fearful time. I would imagine some of y'all, myself, would be a little bit fearful of what might be coming. She says we've got to rescue important documents, and the best we can, we're going to preserve some artifacts in this building as well. So what she does, now first of all, she transforms the position of the first lady. The president's wife used to be just that, the president's wife. She makes it a position, the first lady. She hosts in the White House. Dignitaries come and they have tea and they talk, and like she is a hostess of the White House, not just the president's wife, but really the first lady who has kind of has a direction and opinion on her own. And to this day, first ladies usually have their favorite cause, like Laura Bush, it was literacy. She did a lot for reading in libraries. Michelle Obama, it was what?
Math.
Nutrition, which is why your lunches are what they are today. Thanks,
please
Obama, right?
don't.
Real talk. The first lady today is a position where she kind of has her own influence. She wasn't elected president, but she gets to speak on some national topics because she's the first lady. Dolly Madison really made that happen. Before her, it was just the president's wife. So she really elevated the position of the first lady. On this night, she rescues important documents for starters. Like, hey, all these documents that are important to the government, we got to save those. They can't get burned. They can't fall into British hands. But the cool thing is she saved some important artifacts as well. Most notably, what?
They're painting in George Washington.
The painting of George Washington. That's exactly right. I love this portrait. It shows her being a boss babe, right? Being a leader. Hey, take that down. Put the ladder over there. Pack that up. Let's go, 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 right? She's a woman, but she is a leader. In a man's world, it's really significant that she steps up and she's a leader, especially amidst this crisis, this tragedy. James?
Oh, I knew they were getting that paint because I think crooked.
Yeah, I think it's because you read what you were supposed to read on Friday.
No, I just seen it crooked.
Just like Alexia did. Alexia knew that they saved the picture of George Washington.
Not at all.
Right. It is this picture right here. And how do you think they did it? Right, this small detail. How do you think she acted? Did she like yank the whole frame off the wall?
Nope. They had a ladder. They had a lid just like this, and then
Not
you
quite.
about drop it.
More than one person. TJ?
Roll it up.
That's exactly right. So they didn't take the whole frame off the wall, but they took the canvas, rolled it up, and were able to get it out of the city like that. So kind of smart, right? She made it take up as little space as possible. She saves this picture of George Washington. She saves Martha Washington. She saves her husband, and she saves herself. Well, all the other portraits, John Adams through James Jefferson, I guess, they got burned. So those had to be recreated, unfortunately, right? But she saved him and she saved her own, but she didn't save these two guys. So those paintings those paintings had to be redone. And you have seen this painting in this classroom before. Where? How?
On there,
You recognize
last year.
it? Huh?
On there last year.
Last year? What about last year?
It was on there last year.
Every time I have an intro slide, it is this moving George Washington, which sometimes I don't put up the intro slide, but this is the iconic picture of George Washington who was saved by Dolly Madison. So really cool little extra information about Dolly Madison and how she contributed to the War of 1812. Another battle important to talk about is the Battle of Fort McHenry. What notably happened at the Battle of Fort McHenry? TJ?
The writing of our national anthem.
That's exactly right. From the Battle of Fort McHenry, we have the writing that becomes what we know as the Star-Spangled Banner. But that's not exactly what it was called at first. I'm going to tell you the whole story. So, lawyer, Francis Scott Key, he goes out to a British warship that's holding prisoners. He's not a prisoner, but he's trying to negotiate the release of some prisoners, okay? Well, during the nighttime, the British start bombarding Baltimore. This is right outside of Baltimore. Sometimes it's called the Battle of Baltimore. The British are trying to invade the city. So from the water, they're bombing the city. And Fort McHenry kind of looks like this, right? It's a fort right on the edge of the city. Fort McHenry is what defends Baltimore. If the British got Baltimore, they may well have been able to reinvade the whole country, and we may well have lost the War of 1812. So it's a really important battle, and the fact that we need them to not win. Well, Francis Scott Key, he's on this ship overnight. Again, he's not under arrest, but he is on the ship because they weren't just going to let him go in the middle of the night. And he starts to wonder, hearing all the bombs all around him, does the flag still fly? Is the fort still ours? Will there still be an America in the morning? And you got to think that they didn't have floodlights, they didn't have flashlights, they didn't have night vision, but they had, by the rockets' red glare, with the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. These are the words he writes as he's seeing poof, poof, bombs going up in the sky, and the flag still stands. And the poem he writes is actually called The Defense of Fort McHenry. It's not the Star-Spangled Banner like we know it today. It's also 5 stanzas. The song that we sing before football games, baseball games, our national anthem, the song that we sing is really just the first stanza of the poem. There's more to the poem, and without getting too controversial here, you remember that, remember back a couple of years, people were kneeling during the anthem, and people were trying to protest the national anthem. That's because in the 3rd stanza, there's a reference to slavery. So people were saying that because the Star-Spangled Banner references slavery, we should protest the song, amidst other things. Okay, police, brutality, and whatnot. I'm not going there. But I just want to point out the connection to the Star-Spangled Banner. This is what we actually sing, but the whole thing is a lot longer. I'll point out one more thing. The last line that we sing is actually a question. Now, I don't know about you, but I usually say, that Star-Spangled Banner yet wave over the land of the free and the home of the brave, yeah, exclamation point. Right? I usually say it or sing it like an exclamation. It's actually a question. Does that Star-Spangled Banner still wave over the land of the free and the home of the brave? As Francis Scott Key was on the ship all night long, this is the question he had. Like, does the flag still wave? Is it still waving over the land that I love, the land of the free, the home of the brave? And it actually ends with a statement, not a question, but it ends with a statement. Yes, it does still wave over the land of the free, the home of the brave. So just a little bit more now, right? You know a little bit more now next time you sing the national anthem. This is the actual Star-Spangled Banner. This is the flag that was over the fort on that night. What's something you notice about that flag?
It only has 13 stars.
It should have 15 stars, but there is a cutout in the middle, okay? What else?
It's ripped.
It's ripped, yeah, all on this end. It's more than ripped, you know what it is? People cut slivers of it off as souvenirs. The flag started to, it took a tour of the country, right? Because once the poem got popular, yay for us, we're winning, the flag started to tour the country. And as people would see it, this was normal in the day, they just trim off a little bit of a souvenir to keep for themselves. So they put a stop to that eventually, but not before about half the flag got cut, and a whole star got cut out at one point as well. But what is left of the flag is preserved at a museum. It's in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., and I've seen it. It's a very beautiful setup. You got to go in, and there's low light. There's actually it's like a blue, UV protected kind of a light because it's very, very, very brittle cloth at this point, very fragile material. You go in, it's very quiet. There's kind of a nice setup of the star, the words of the Star Spangled Banner around you. It's just people just sitting, looking at the flag and thinking about that night. At least that's what I do. I wonder what it would have been like to be there on that night. Should you ever get the chance to go visit Washington, D.C., you should absolutely go see the Star Spangled Banner. So a little bit extra for you there on the Battle of Fort McHenry. One more battle, super important to talk about, the Battle of New Orleans. What is notable about the Battle of New Orleans?
It's where they got the new Louisiana territory.
It was in Louisiana. Okay, so it's in New Orleans.
Oh, yeah,
That's true. TJ?
It labeled Andrew Jackson as a war hero and turned the tide of the war.
The guy who gained the most out of the Battle of New Orleans is definitely Andrew Jackson. He becomes famous because of the Battle of New Orleans. How about this? Here's what's really notable about the Battle of New Orleans. It didn't need to happen. The war technically was already over. December of 1814, both sides signed a treaty in Belgium, not Paris this time, but Ghent, Belgium, and they end the war. The treaty is not major, right? It doesn't really give land to one side or the other. It just kind of returns everything back to where it was before the war started. So in a way, it's almost like, why did we even fight the war? But the commanders in the field, they didn't get word that the war was over. And I'll tell you, from a military perspective, you're going to fight on the last orders that you have. So the British commander, he didn't know that this treaty had been signed, and his orders were to try to take the city of New Orleans, take the port and the city of New Orleans. So that's what the British do. They come in through the water. Andrew Jackson and his men, they're a unique group. They're a bunch of vagabonds. Half of them are, police convicts. Some of them are slaves. Not many of them are really trained soldiers. So this group of vagabonds defends the city of New Orleans. 2,000 British casualties, 13 American dead. So very lopsided in that sense. The sad part of all that is that no one needed to die because the war was already over. That said, it kind of solidifies that American victory. And, I'm sure Andrew Jackson wasn't like up on a berm waving his sword like that, right? He's exposing himself to fire. But this is the image that came from Andrew Jackson, a man of the people, fighting for New Orleans. Yeah! So the person who gained the most from the Battle of New Orleans, definitely Andrew Jackson. He became famous. And when you're famous, what can you do?
Everything.
Arguably anything you want. Related to politics, how does being famous help you?
You could gain position and power.
Name recognition, and he uses his fame to run for president, which is something we'll see later this week. So, Battle of New Orleans, the person who gained the most from it is definitely Andrew Jackson, and I'm going to save the introduction to his life for a little bit later this week when we talk about him. Kind of round out the effects of the war. Okay, your notes are called the causes and effects of the War of 1812. So what came from it? One, big surge in American nationalism. Before this, people would say, I'm a Virginian, I'm a Marylander, I'm from Carolina. They wouldn't say I'm an American. But after the War of 1812, hey, we beat the British twice. A lot of people call this the Second War for Independence. I'm an American, and I'm proud of that. So American nationalism and national identity started to take root after this. Here's something else that came from it. We got good at doing our own industry and our own farming. Previous to this, we relied on Britain for a lot of things. We were doing a lot of trade with Britain. This is crazy, but a lot of the crops in the South never made it to the North. They got traded to England, right across the ocean. Well, when we got cut off from our trade partner, we had to get good at doing our own. We had to do our own food, agriculture, manufacturing, industry. So we had to grow up a little bit as a country. Have you ever, I've used a parenting analogy several times this year, right? So I'm going to do that again on the parenting thing. Have your parents ever let you struggle through a hard time And even though they could have rescued you, they didn't, so that you would grow from it. Can you think of a situation like that? Anybody want to share a situation like that? 24/7? Yeah, you know, James, you having a job and your parents make you go and labor and you have a boss, right? That's
Technically, my boss is my dad.
all right. Well, would you say that that's helped you grow up? Helped you grow up a little bit. It might be if you get in a car wreck and everything's okay, your parents let you deal with the ticket, deal with the police officers, and deal with the money, the insurance, even though they could help you out. Why would they let you go through that difficulty?
Life lessons.
Life lessons. Grow up from it. So take that idea. It's kind of what happens here. We got cut off from Britain. We had to grow up. We had to grow up in agriculture and industry. So that is a big takeaway from the War of 1812. Previously, we had to make or grow the goods that we previously bought and traded with Britain. So take my parenting analogy and run with it a little bit there. Another thing that comes from the war is this thing called the American system. American system is proposed by Henry Clay. Henry Clay is going to be a very influential non-president. Just like Alexander Hamilton is very influential, but he's never president. Henry Clay is going to be a very influential non-president, and we are going to keep talking about him for several more class periods, right? He's going to be a small part of several more things going forward. Well, here's the American system. This is what he proposed. 3 parts. 1, a tax on non-American goods. This was supposed to make American goods cheaper, because if there's a tax on non-American goods, then people are going to buy American goods. They're cheaper. But in the end, other countries retaliated with their own tax on American goods. Just long story short, I think it was well intentioned. He wanted to help American growers and sellers, but in the end, it really hurt American goods. So that was a thumbs down. Next was he recreated the National Bank. Who likes the National Bank?
Federalists.
Rich people, Federalists. So agriculturists, people involved in agriculture, they felt like they were getting shafted again. And then finally, internal improvements. He proposes a lot of roads, canals, and railroads being built. It's almost like everything but airports, because they don't have airplanes and airports just yet. But think about this. That's a good idea. It's going to connect the country. It's going to help travel and trade go all throughout the country. But anytime you build something, what does it cost? And who pays for it? The what?
The taxes.
She said the government,
Taxes.
the people, through taxes, okay? So we're going to keep seeing this as well. It's nice to have stuff. It's nice to have programs. But programs and stuff cost money, and money comes from the people through taxes. So the criticism of the American system is that it was related to the rich people. The rich got richer, the poor guys had to pay taxes, and that didn't sit well with the agriculturalists. Who do you think is going to step up and speak on behalf of agriculture? Which party is more related to the common man at this point? Anti-federalists, but they're called Democratic Republicans. And who is their leader still? Our man, Thomas Jefferson.
I just said
Right.
that.
I didn't hear you. And his initials are TJ. So that's why I pointed to him. Thomas Jefferson takes up the burden of speaking for the common man, for the agriculturalists. And even though he's not the president anymore, hear me on this. Don't take this the wrong way. Just like Donald Trump still chimes in on things related to the Republican perspective, even though he's not president anymore, he still chimes in. Same thing. Thomas Jefferson wasn't president anymore, but he was still chiming in. Okay, so big opponent is going to be Thomas Jefferson because it only helped the rich get richer. But that's the end of the war. Yay for us. We win. Last time we won, it was the French and Indian War, and we were British. This time we are our own country. We are Americans. We win the war. Of note, this is the RIP moment for the Federalist Party. Because they were not in favor of the war, they looked like chumps. Okay, they looked unpatriotic, maybe even treasonous. Like they didn't support the war. Oh, you British lovers, right? That was the accusation. So the Federalist Party kind of fades away, and what we have left is one party, the Democratic Republicans. And when we have a presidential election roll around, there's really only one man who's in line to be that candidate, This is how we get James Monroe as the 5th president of the United States. Another James. Gotta talk about James for like 30 more minutes, and then maybe we're done. Talk about James's. But right now, we're gonna go to that.
Well,
Hey, that was the recap of the War of 1812. So, any questions you had, I hope I answered them.
anyways, I didn't know where I've been everywhere.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere. I've been everywhere, man. What?
I've been
Places,
to-
I like it.
I've been Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Mississippi, Texas, Tennessee.
Sarah.
Me.
Turned 17 today.
We turn 17 next Monday.
Turning 17.
Why too late?
He's older than me, though.
Y'all let me.
Oh.
I know.
So you're
it hurts
an
my feelings.
05 too. You're an 05 too.
My feelings are hurt. Now I feel like I don't care about it.
What's your name?
No, I said your name.
That's good. Hey, James.
What?
Miss Olga.
There's another one you read, bro.
It's already broken.
All right, I hear that Nicole is going to be disappointed that she wasn't here for our conversation about the War of 1812. So everybody turn to the camera and say, "Hey, Nicole."
Hey, Nicole! Yeah!
You just feel she'll actually watch the video. No? She don't part of it? She might. If any students might, I think Nicole might. Like there are students who definitely won't, but I think Nicole might. Fair?
Hey, Dylan.
You go ahead. All right, James Monroe. Let's talk Monroe. Monroe is going to be two significant things, and you got a new page in front of you. There's James Monroe, the category. There's the Missouri Compromise, and there's the Monroe Doctrine. Okay, so you can see where we're going today. Not too much on each portion of it. James Monroe enters the presidency in what could be called the era of good feelings. You're already missing some conversation here. The era of good feelings. There's no wars to fight. There's no controversies to solve. There's no crises consuming the nation. It's just good times. The era of good feelings. So he gets to run with that. He has a very positive presidency early on because there's no big problem consuming the country. As the fifth president, he is often called the last of the Revolutionary War generation or the last of the founding fathers. He was the last to even wear the old style dress. Like he had the Knickerbocker, the Knickerbocker pants, and he had the tricorn hat, the triangle shaped hats. Okay, he was the last of the founding fathers. Everyone coming after him is going to be from that new generation. It's almost like a changing of perspective. So that's why we talk about the first 5 presidents being the founding fathers. James Monroe is the last one of them. Presided over peace and prosperity, but has to tackle 2 big issues, and that's what we're going to talk about. First, here's the era of good feelings. I like the political cartoon there. It says one party. Remember, the Federalists had faded away, so there's just one party left. United we stand, divided we lose to Britain. This is James Monroe, right? He was James Madison's Secretary of State, and I told you that that's the position where it's almost like you get to be the next president, right? If you're the Secretary of State, you're in line for the presidency. Of course, he had to get elected, but there's only one party, right? He was the only one running, essentially, and that's how he walks into the presidency in this time of unity. Now, I know you guys didn't live this and you won't fully understand it, but I think about this national unity kind of like the country was right after September 11th, 2001.
Yeah.
Now, of course, that was a bad time. We'd just been attacked, but the unity was pretty remarkable. I lived it. I was in 8th grade at the time, so I remember our country being united. Think about now winning the War of 1812 and the unity that came from that. That's what James Monroe was living under. James Monroe is a president of 2 lines. Or he has a presidency that deal with 2 lines. And you may notice I have a line in the classroom right here. So these are the lines that we're going to be talking about. Here's the first one. So our first issue that we got to tackle in the line that we have to draw is related to Missouri. The state of, where is it? Line number 1 comes in 1820, and we're going to deal with Missouri in the Missouri Compromise. So Missouri up to this point had been a territory, and this is what you should write under Missouri Compromise. Missouri had been a territory, and in the territory of Missouri, they had allowed slavery. Well, Missouri grows large enough to apply for statehood, and when they apply for statehood, they apply as a slave state. The grand problem at this time, other than slavery's always been a problem, but the problem is that our country is balanced in the Senate, 11 free states, 11 slave states. No region has a dominance over the other. No region has more power than the other.
In Congress, all votes are even. 11 states free, 11 states slave. Well, Missouri comes in and applies to be a slave state. That is going to tip the balance towards the southern region, tip the balance towards the slaveholding states, and quite frankly, it's just going to mess up a lot of the peace and tranquility that had been going on in Congress at this time. So what we need to do is answer the question of how to keep and maintain balance with Missouri's statehood application. So let me ask you, how would you keep balance in the country at this time with this as a situation?
Okay, so I split it right in half and say you're two states, but in one like one's not slave and one was slave.
So you want to split Missouri in half?
Exactly. And make it fair.
Okay, that is a
It's two states then.
Exactly.
okay. That is a fair idea. TJ, you want to add to that?
I relatively had the same idea as James, except I wasn't gonna split the state itself in half. But like, my idea was like the one part of the state, like anything under this line, slave, anything above this line, free.
You guys are thinkers for sure. Alex, shaking your head? Huh? Well, so here's the problem with that, is that slavery is not confined to only one portion of Missouri, right? There is agriculture and there is slavery all throughout the state of Missouri. So if you were to just draw a line, some plantation owners would be happy and some plantation owners would feel like they were out. So good thought, just not quite the way that it needs to be done. Girls, you have anything to add to that? Any thoughts to add to that? So boys, you are definitely on the right track. Here's what is determined to happen. They add two states at the same time. The state of Maine, which is the northernmost state in the country, and it's in green right there. I don't know why it blends right into Canada. But the state of Maine is added at the exact same time as the state of Missouri. So the Missouri Compromise is adding two states at the same time. And I think it's really easy to remember, and I want you to sketch this onto your notes. Draw yourself some M&Ms. Missouri and Maine, M&M. The Missouri Compromise is adding two states at the same time, Missouri and Maine. Why Maine gets left out of the name, I don't know, but it's called the Missouri Compromise, and it is the states of Missouri and Maine being added at the same time. M&M, draw yourself some pan-coated chocolate candies, and put some M's on it and write the word Maine and write the word Missouri. That's how you should remember the Missouri Compromise, M&M. Two states being added at the same time. This is 1820, by the way, so this is about halfway through James Monroe's 8 years. He gets 2 terms, M-A-I-N-E. James Monroe gets 2 terms, so the first 4 years was that era of good feelings. This happens kind of right at the end of his first term. And so, he had a good run with no big issues. This is kind of halfway through his presidency overall. Now, we tackled this problem here, 1820, today, right? It's settled for today. What about the next time that a state, a territory applies to become a state? Whether they're free or slave, we're going to be in the same position of upsetting a balance. What could we do to determine a solution before that problem even arises again? What would you do?
Initiate civil war.
James is launching straight towards what will happen.
Yeah.
But James, I like to think of it as putting a lot of Band-Aids on the wound for time after time until we go to war.
Eventually.
So what is the solution for now? Unfortunately, it won't last. We know that. But what would the solution be for now? TJ?
Have like a set border of slavery cannot be in any place above this line or whatever, like
Okay.
Mason-Dixon, why not?
I'm just gonna tell TJ he's exactly right. TJ, it's not the so-called Mason-Dixon line, but it becomes called the 3630 line of latitude. So here in our classroom is a red line, and I think of red line like do not cross. The 3630 line of latitude, it's just an imaginary line. There's not a mountain range there. There's not a river there. It's just related to latitude. today on your GPS, right, you can navigate via latitude, but early explorers came up with these lines of latitude. 3630, north of it, future territories will be admitted as free. South of it, future territories will be admitted as slave. So TJ, you were spot on with your thought process there. And what it actually is this 3630 line. It's 36 degrees, 30 minutes. That's how you speak in terms of latitude. TJ, question?
The reason I
You should write this down under Missouri Compromise.
the reason I thought of that is I've already learned this on my own.
Good, good. I'm glad when y'all bring prior knowledge to the room. James.
Okay, so if you keep putting Band-Aid on it like that,
Band-Aids don't fix
what are you
bullet
putting the
holes.
Band-Aid
You
on?
say sorry just for show. You look like that. You look ghost.
can I,
So I'm singing Taylor Swift.
yes, that, and I'm trying to talk. But one day you have to get the Band-Aid off, and it's gonna hurt a lot worse if you wait.
That is deep and profound and true. Bottom line, James, that is true. Unfortunately, that's where we're headed. As students of history, we know we're headed towards the American Civil War, and it's kind of painful to watch it happen. In these decades before we actually get to the war, we're like, if they did something differently right here, maybe it would change. But we can't go backwards, right? We can't change the decades before the war. We just got to study what actually happened and figure out how to not make the same mistakes in the future. James, that was a deep statement, and you're definitely a thinker. Here's the actual line. Let me put it on a map for you. So 3630, it is the border of the southern border of Missouri. Missouri is an exception to this particular rule. Okay, Missouri is north of it, but it's part of the Missouri Compromise, right? Missouri is admitted as slave, Maine is admitted as free, and for the future, all territory to the north, which is in orange, is determined to be free. All territory to the south, which encompasses Arkansas and Florida, is determined to be eligible for slavery. They could have applied to be free, but they wouldn't. They weren't gonna. Okay, James?
Okay, so first, that ain't the only state that was recommended. There is Virginia.
Well, okay, you make a great point. These are already states, right? We're not gonna make them go backwards. I don't know how they negotiated this line exactly. Obviously, Kentucky, Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware are in there, but this is how the line was negotiated. To the south, future slavery. To the north, future free. What you already are is what you already are. You get to stay that.
Oh, and another thing I was gonna add on to, that line's crooked because it is.
Well, the earth is curved. The earth is, no, it's the curvature of the earth. I'm not gonna get into the geography with you, but it's the curvature of the earth. That's why it's the 3630 line. All right, there's another map showing it to you just slightly differently. To be clear, we don't have this land yet, and we don't have this land yet. So more land, more problems. As we acquire more land, we're gonna have more problems with the slavery question, and we're walking ourselves towards the Civil War. Exactly right.
I just say go ahead and get it
All
over.
right, that was line number one. Ask me a question about the Missouri Compromise. I need one question before I move on. Something on your
Now,
mind.
why they make a compromise? Why couldn't they just make it one simple thing?
No. Compromise says you don't get all that you want, and you don't get all that you want, but we're gonna meet in the middle, right? Yeah, equal. I would have preferred for them to say all future territories will be free.
Okay.
Someone else, some other bad person in history would have said, I prefer all future territories to be slave. So compromise was in the middle. Slavery is a very vexing question in American history, a very complicated relationship. We can look at it and plainly see that human enslavement is wrong. At the time, there's almost this, it's hard to say, almost this gentleman's agreement to ignore it, right? The first four presidents, Washington through Madison, they didn't like human enslavement. A lot of their writings do show that, but also a lot of their behavior shows that they kept slaves and they worked slaves on their fields. A lot of them believe that slavery would die out in a generation or two, right? The federal government doesn't have to put its fingers into the slavery question because it's just going to go away eventually. We know that's not the case. We know that we have to fight a war over it. So James Monroe is really the first to have to deal with it from his government position. Line number one, Missouri Compromise. Line number two is going to become known as the Monroe Doctrine. Now, James, if you are ever president, you write doctrine, you can call it the Vickers Doctrine. But James Monroe, in this case, writes this doctrine. He calls it the Monroe Doctrine. It is known as the Monroe Doctrine. Let's look at what it is. First of all, we have to understand all that's going on in the Americas. When I say the Americas, plural, what am I referring to? Yeah, north, south, don't forget central, the Caribbean island, Bahamas, Haiti, Cuba, etc. Even Alaska, right? Like Canada and Alaska. This is the Americas. It's the Western Hemisphere, what we call the Western Hemisphere. So what's going on in Latin and South America is a sequence of revolutions, independence movements, very similar to what we just did as a country. They saw how we broke away from our colonizers, and they said, hey, viva la liberty, we want to have independence as well. And a lot of these Spanish, Latin American, South American countries, I'm not going to go into all of them because that's not world history, but a lot of these countries fought for and gained independence from their colonizers, primarily Spain and Portugal. So, I mean, we can look at this map here. We see Colombia and Bolivia and Chile, Peru, and Argentina, Buenos Aires, like a lot of independence movements happening in South America. This is the setup point. So you got Spain and Portugal getting kicked out of America, or getting kicked out of the Western Hemisphere. That's the starting point. Well, viva la liberty, right? We love liberty. We want to support independence movements. This picture here shows just how widespread they were. You even see a Catholic priest, right, in the portrait. You see swords, you see guns, you see all the, you see your guerrilla fighters, you see your generals. Like it's a big independence movement, breaking away from the European colonizers, Spain, Portugal, France, Britain. A lot going on here. Cool. How does it affect U.S. history? Let's find out. So these European monarchies that just got kicked out of the Western Hemisphere, they want their land back. So the picture you see here shows them kind of peeping all the way from Europe. Peeping all the way from Europe back across the Atlantic Ocean, and they're eyeballing the land that they just lost. They want it back. They just lost it and they want it back. Well, if you are a young, brash, but growing America, how does this affect you? What do you think about it? What were you going to say?
I was going to ask, if they're from over in Europe, how are they going to see us?
Well, that's the political cartoon, okay? Not literal, but figurative.
No, you said they were peeping across the border.
That's right, they are peeping across. So as a young America, this concerns you. Because what if they come back over with a navy and a stronger military, and what if they try to take back all their colonies? This concerns us, right? We want, they're gone, they need to stay gone. That's the most important part. They're gone, they need to stay gone. So this becomes the Monroe Doctrine. Write this down, the Monroe Doctrine. December of 1823, okay, this is the second big thing in his presidency. President Monroe issues the Monroe Doctrine. Now, ironically, he actually did not write most of it. Most of it was written by his Secretary of State, John Quincy Adams, and I kind of always feel like he's like, shh, don't tell anybody that I didn't write my own doctrine. The picture you see on the screen there, right, I'll let you get the words down, but the picture you see on the screen there shows Uncle Sam drawing a line in the sand. And I know we just read about Uncle Sam, so he's kind of a new character in U.S. history, actually being drawn in that fashion. He draws a line in the sand, and what does the line actually say? The line says the Monroe Doctrine. On the other side of the line, looking at those characters and try to decipher who are they. Who do you think they are? People from Europe, right? So you got the portly English gentleman, and he's fat because he's a very large empire. You have the Portuguese, Spanish-looking guy, right, with his mustache and his spiked helmet. But even if you don't know all of that about the military uniforms, you can discern that that's Europe, right? You're going to say it looks German, right? There's the heritage of Spanish, Portuguese, German, etc. It's a combination. It shows Europe, right?
It just really reminded me of the Kaiser.
That's right. And I knew that you were going to say that, actually. Particularly, I woke up this morning and said, I bet TJ's going to think that's German. It shows that Uncle Sam has drawn a line in the ground, and he's basically saying, you stay over there, we'll stay over here.
Why is this chin so long?
You stay over there, we'll stay over here. Now, what do you think this line actually is? Oh, James. Spot on. James, I need some help. I'll pick the two. James and Alexia. I need help turning this paper So if you would, it's taped to the desk just a little bit.
Hey, I want that now.
Alexia, will you please?
I don't want that in.
Keep both of these papers together. And we're gonna go to, James, your left. Okay, so undo the, don't rip the paper, undo the tape, turn to the left. There you go, there you go. This is the second line of the Monroe Presidency.
You're supposed to keep them
Yeah, keep the
together.
papers together.
Go ahead, over. No, clearly you didn't.
Clearly, we needed a woman to help, which is why I got the help from Alexia. There we go.
You can't make that two things, you need to know two things.
You messed it up.
I haven't done that, you twisted it.
I have chosen poorly, haven't I?
Don't put it with James.
Now you messed up.
Wait till I move from that
That's
side.
where you messed up. You messed up when you got her.
All right, hey, I made a large classroom demonstration so that we can understand the line is the Atlantic Ocean. Old world, you stay where you belong. We're the new world. We're gonna stay here. What separates us is the Atlantic Ocean. It's really big, by the way. There's no reason we should ever cross paths. You stay there, we'll stay here. There's no reason that we should ever cross paths. That's the heart of the Monroe Doctrine. Now I'm gonna put some words on the screen. I'm gonna kind of not belabor the point too much. Do write this down. This is the Monroe Doctrine in a single sentence. Okay, I've summarized it for you. The policy that states we will not seek additional land beyond our borders, but we will prevent anyone else from coming into our lands or into the Western Hemisphere. Western Hemisphere, that's our playground. We get to do business in the Western Hemisphere. We will protect any independence movement in the Western Hemisphere. You guys stay where you belong. We're gonna stay where we are. Atlantic Ocean in between us. Do not cross the line. So, give you a second to write that down. That's the Monroe Doctrine in a single sentence. I made it nice and short for you. You guys know how I like to do. I'll give it to you up front, then I'm going to peel it back just a little bit. So write this up front, and you won't necessarily need to write down the next 4 points that I'm going to peel back for you. It'll already make sense because you've already written the big sentence. Alex, that was me yesterday. I got all sorts of sneezy after mowing the grass yesterday. Zizal changed my life. Zyrtec, I feel like my body got too used to Zyrtec, so I started taking Zizal.
Every week you're supposed to switch it up.
Not an advertisement for Zizal.
Every week you're supposed to switch it up.
By every week, but I'll agree with occasionally.
Okay, so the fact that you have the YouTube pulled up right there and you just said something about Zizal makes me just wonder if that was a sponsor.
If an ad comes up, we can really know that Zuckerberg's watching. We will not seek more land. We will seek to prevent other nations from meddling in the Western Hemisphere. Pencils down when you're done. They'll let me know I can move on. So I'm going to tell you 4 points of the Monroe Doctrine. Like I said, if you've already written this, you got it. Just listen. All right, just listen. Did the red line. I got the blue ocean. Point of that is so that you understand Monroe deals with 2 lines. I go all in on certain things in the classroom so that your brain will make that connection later. All right, I'm gonna move on. You've got a part where you can get it from, okay? Number 1, the American continents are closed for colonization. Closed for colonization. You stay over there. I've already said it. Why? Number 2 is the why. We are different from each other. You are a monarchy. You have a king. You select your leader through the bloodline. We fought to get rid of all of that in the first place. We elect our leaders democratically now. We're different. Monarchy, democracy. I'll go back, James. I'll go back. Okay. Monarchy, democracy. 3, this is the heart of that statement you just wrote anyway. If you cross the line, we will consider it a threat and we will defend as we need to. Your parents ever said that? Well, I wish you would cross that line. Fool, I wish you would. Give me a reason to. Give me a reason to. Parents ever say that? What's that? That's all you hear. Well, James Monroe, he was serious, right? If you cross that line, it will be considered a hostile action, and we will take action accordingly. Okay, so that's number 3. And 4, I like this because it shows it's a balanced negotiation. We aren't just saying, hey, Europe, we're going to poke you around and you can't cross your line. We also say, and we're going to stay right here, okay? You stay over there, we'll stay over here, everything will be gravy. America first, that's our attitude, right? We're going to take care of America first. We're not going to get involved in European conflicts. Summarized, we've already said this really. Don't reestablish colonies in the Americas. If you do, we're going to consider it dangerous. We'll take action. And by the way, we promise to stay out of European affairs as well. Here's the summary. Simply put, you stay there, we'll stay here. Big old thing between us, I like to call it the ocean. There's no reason for us to cross paths. Okay, so I try to give you the fun way to think of it. You stay over there, Europe. We'll stay over here, America. Big old ocean in between us. James.
You said you like to call it the ocean. Isn't that the only thing it is, the ocean?
This guy. This whole doctrine sounds a whole lot like what? Sounds like someone has said something very similar before.
George Washington.
George Washington said
We will not go.
Do not get involved in foreign.
See, I know it's George Washington something.
George Washington's farewell address, he says pretty much exactly this. He advocates for neutrality. He says, do not get involved in foreign entanglements. Now, the difference is, for him, it was just his closing comments, right? He said it. He didn't have a policy that really backed that up. Monroe, 30 years later, he says, George Washington was definitely right. This is a policy now. It's the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine is one of the longest lasting precedents set by the early presidents. Precedents set by the early presidents. It's going to bring us all the way into really the modern day. Now, we will get entangled in European wars on occasion, but this is going to be used by President McKinley to justify the Spanish-American War, Teddy Roosevelt to justify and go forward with the Panama Canal, John F. Kennedy all the way into the 60s to justify the blockade of Cuba as the Soviet Union is meddling into the Western Hemisphere. So the Monroe Doctrine is going to be around for a very long time. We're going to keep talking about it in various ways. And in fact, I'm going to reference the President's Wall here. President Theodore Roosevelt is actually going to add to it. You see, it's called the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. I'm not going to clutter your brain. We'll get there, okay? We're going to talk about the Monroe Doctrine several more times into the future. So we got to understand it. The big takeaway then, we prove that we are a world power. Okay, we're not just some punk teenager country anymore. We have created a law, a doctrine, a policy that deals with the whole world. We are telling Europe what to do. We have made our own pledge. You stay over there, we'll stay over here. We are a world power at this point.
You're missing some presidents.
I am missing some presidents because we don't talk about them in our class. And I think it's better to help you focus on what matters instead of cluttering your brain with all the extras. How about that? This is just one more look at the Monroe Doctrine. Just that line being drawn one more time. So, summary, James Monroe, it's a presidency of 2 lines. The Missouri Compromise, line number 1. What was the number on that? What was the line, the latitude? 3630. And then the Monroe Doctrine, what was the line on it? Specifically the whole big ocean. Yeah. So take it back to where we started. Think about this again. What do you think this statement means now in light of what we talked
You
about?
stay on the other side of that ocean, I'll be right here.
Good fences make good neighbors. It's actually on your notes, okay? I want your reflection on this statement one more time. So I'll be quiet for a second and let you do that
Hey, you
reflection.
might need to go back.
Keep it distant. Yeah, keep it distant.
In light of what we talked about, right? At first it was just an opener. But now that we've talked about it, what do you think about good fences and good neighbors? What does that statement mean to you now that we've talked about the Monroe Doctrine?
Keep it distant.
No wrong answers. Just want your reflection at the end of our class period here.
Can you go back now?
Should I get it from TJ?
He didn't have it.
I'll get it from Wendy.
Minutes. You know what that?
All right, yeah, hear me on this. I will go back in a second, James. I'll go back in a second. Here's my answer to that question. Presently, the world you've always lived in, how do we think of England, Britain today? What kind of a country are they to us? Allies. Friends.
Really? They're allies?
We have not talked about Britain being our friend to this point yet. I think, and I think foreign policy supports this boundary line, this fence, made for good friends eventually. We had to cool off and chill out, right? We had to have some space for a minute. But once we got out of each other's affairs, we actually became good friends, allies, trading partners, helping each other out in war, all that kind of stuff. So we've talked about Britain as an enemy so far, only as an enemy. But soon they're going to be our friend. And I think it starts off with a good fence like this. Good fences make good neighbors. We are now good neighbors to each other, even from across the pond. James?
All right, so this is gonna keep bothering me.
Okay.
So what do you think the founding fathers would think if they were here now and seeing that we were allies with the British?
Yeah, you know what? You lead me right to it. I have trained with the British Army before. Okay, I've done military exercises where we work together, and we laughed about things like the Gadsden flag. We talked about our revolution. We were planning, this was when I was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. We were planning to take them to a battlefield, kind of as just a brothers in arms field trip, if you will. But the only battlefields nearby were battlefields from the Revolution where we beat the British. And we actually were like, we maybe shouldn't take them to a battlefield where we beat them in the Revolution. Kind of as a joke. Point is, we're so far past that history. Like that was then, this is now. Yeah, it's part of our shared history. Ha ha, we beat you. It's kind of how that goes. But today we train with them. We're partners. We're brothers in arms. We're allies. We're NATO together. So it is. We acknowledge the history, but presently, did you say what was the question?
No.
Oh, I was going to explain it. Okay. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Here's how we're going to end it out. Okay, we got about 15 minutes, so you owe me a little bit more here. This is that. No, hear me on this. This is that GSE video where last time we watched 5 in a row, and I'm trying to not do that this time. I'm trying to show you these review videos along the way. Here's what I want you to take out of this video. First and third, they said, when the video was over, they're like, yo, Ms. Swanson, I think you said every word in that video. And if your brain can do that, if you're like, yep, we talked about that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and that, if your brain can catch what's in this video, and you know that we talked about it, you're doing great. If you hear something in this video that you're like, oh, I'm not sure we talked about that, you need to lean into that president, because we did talk about everything that's in this video, okay? So take it for the review that it is. It's a pretty good video. If you feel good about what's in the video, you're on the right track. If you're fuzzy on certain things, you know what you need to study. Come here, Jackson. All right, here we go.
Following the ratification of the Constitution, George Washington was elected the first President of the United States because he was the most influential and popular figure of the time. There was no clear understanding of how the office of the President would operate. The Constitution created the office, but there were no guidelines for how the executive branch of the government would operate. Washington was challenged to chart the course for himself and future presidents. He often remarked, "I walk on untrodden ground." During his 2 terms in office, Washington set many precedents for the position. These remained accepted procedure and created the foundation for success in the new republic. The Constitution did not address the title of the new president. Much discussion and debate centered on this seemingly trivial issue. Some believed the office